Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at ratios and rates. So last year as sixth graders, we did a lot of talk about what a ratio was. So I just want to make sure we all remember that. A ratio is where we compare two quantities. And quantities is just a fancy word that means two amounts of something. So we're comparing two amounts to each other. And so a rate is where the units are different. So in a ratio, we might be comparing 90 to 3. So that might be something like there were 90 people to 3 cars or something like that. A rate has a little bit more specific units. The units are going to usually tell us how fast something is happening. So there's lots of different rates that we're familiar with. Miles per hour, words per minute, meters per second. So rates usually are telling us how fast something happens, or sometimes they can tell us something called a unit price. So rates can also be talking about money. Today we're going to focus on how fast, rates that are looking at speed, and then we're going to talk about the whole unit price a little bit later. But again, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. Notice we don't necessarily have the units written, whereas a rate is a comparison with the units written, and it tells us how fast something's happening or how much of something that we have. Now, when we're looking at the unit rate, that means specifically how much per one item. So if I say I've got 90 students and 3 buses, the unit rate would be figuring out how many students could go per bus. So we would say, okay, we need to get that 90 to 3, and we need to reduce it down. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can go about reducing this. One is to think of it kind of like a fraction, although it is not a fraction. And we could be looking at common factors. So that's where we're thinking, okay, is there a number that we could divide 90 and 3 by? And so some of you might be thinking, oh yeah, look, we could divide both of those by 3. And that gets us to our 30 to 1. Notice that 3 was our denominator. So to get our unit rate, we are going to be dividing by our denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice looking at some rates, and we're going to practice finding the unit rate, which is going to be a division problem. So let's look at a couple of these. So here we have Jeff can type 30 words in half a minute. So the first thing I always want to do is I always want to set up my ratio first. That's always step 1. Set up our ratio. So my ratio is Jeff is able to type 30 words, and again, we always write those units. And he is able to do that in half of a minute. Now, what we want to do is we want to figure out how many words can he type in 1 minute. So we want the denominator not to be a half of a minute, but to be 1 minute. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to divide by our denominator. So our denominator is 1/2. So we're going to divide 30 by 1/2. Now, for some of us, we're like, oh gosh, it's a fraction. Ugh. So we got to pull back all of those things that we've been practicing. And so over here, we're thinking, okay, 30 over 1 divided by 1/2. All right, I'm going to keep 30 over 1. I'm going to change multiplication to division. I'm going to flip, and then I would multiply straight across. 30 times 2 is 60 over 1. So 60, here's my 1 right here. And then in the numerator would be my 60 words. Now, some of you were like, well, half a minute, 2 halves is a whole. So you just multiplied it by 2. Well, notice how when we did our fractions, that's what we were really doing. We were just multiplying by 2. So either way is fine, but you do need to make sure you set up the ratio, you show me what you're dividing by, and then you give me your unit rate, most important, with the units labeled. So let's try another one of these. So it says, Penelope can type 90 words in 2 minutes. So there's my ratio, 90 words in 2 minutes. I want to know, all right, well, in 1 minute, how many words can Penelope type? So again, what do? I look at my denominator and I divide both parts by my denominator. And so some of you can do this division in your head, great. Some of you need to write out long division, great, that's fine. But 90 divided by 2 is 45 words per minute. Okay, let's look at another one. Now this one, the numbers are getting a little bit bigger. 455 students to 91 computers. So again, we set up our ratio, 455 students to 91 computers. We want to know how many students are sharing each computer. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at our denominator and we're going to divide by 91. Now, this is probably a division that you're like, yikes, I'm not doing that in my head, and that's fine. So 91 divided into 455, and you're like, oh, God, okay. Well, 90 is close to 100, right? So 100 would go into 400 about 4 times, but this is more than 400. It's almost 500. So I'm going to estimate about 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 9 is 45. And look at that. Worked out perfectly. So we've got 5 students per computer. Okay, so we're also going to look at finding unit rates from tables and graphs. Now, when we look at tables and graphs, we basically have ratios in our table. So here's a ratio. Here's another ratio. Those 2 numbers are organized in the table together because they go together. And then here's another ratio. Now, it doesn't matter which pair I use from the table to find my unit rate. So what I'm going to do is take what I know. I know that I have 6 people, and the price is $12. Now, if I want the unit rate, this is where it gets a little tricky. Do I want to know the price per person? So how much does it cost for one person to get on the bus? Or do I want to know how many people get on the bus with dollars? Well, let's think about that. I can break dollars up into change, but I can't break people up into parts. So I want to know, what is the cost for one person to get on the bus? So this is where it was a little tricky, because this time we're dividing by the numerator. We're dividing by 6. And we can see that our price is $2 per person. Okay, Now we're going to look at this table. Now, when I'm reading a table, all of the words on there tell me a lot of information. So, for example, the title, that tells me what the table's about. So this table is about a subway car and how fast it can go. So this is how fast is the subway going. Okay, well, when we're talking about the speed of the subway, we're looking at its distance, how many miles it can go, and we're comparing that to minutes. How long does it take the subway to go a certain number of miles? And it tells us we want to find the speed in miles per minute. That means that we want the miles on the top and we want the minutes on the bottom. So I have lots of ordered pairs, right? I've got these two different sets. It doesn't matter which one I use. So this is called our x-axis right here. And our x is representing time. Now, when we're looking at ordered pairs, x is always the first number, y is always the second. So this first number is the time. And then when I'm looking over here, this is my y-axis. I'm going to make that a better color so that it's a little more distinguishable. This is my y-axis over here. And this is my distance. So this value over here is the y. Okay, so I'm going to set up my ratio. And again, I want my miles first. So I want my distance first. So I'm going to put the 1/4, and that's in miles. And then it takes me half of a minute to go 1/4 of a mile. Now, I want to know how far can I go in 1 minute. So again, I'm dividing by that 1/2. Dividing by that 1/2. Okay, so if I need to, I can do the arithmetic off to the side. 1/4 divided by 1/2. I'm going to keep, change, flip, multiply straight across, and I end up with 2/4, or it takes me a minute to go half of a mile, or I can travel half of a mile in a minute.